Hi there, it's Dr. Shiana Reams, and this week we're going to do something a little bit different. So normally I've been trying to do a YouTube video on Wednesdays, but this week has been super busy. I've got papers I'm grading. I'm teaching a class called Myth, Religion, and Magic in Ancient Greece, which is a lot of fun. I've got their myth papers to grade. I've got some other stuff I've been doing for the committee, the Dean's Advisory Committee. So professors do all this other stuff. I think that folks forget about. We don't just go in and teach classes. We have other jobs and other service around the university. So I didn't really have the time to sit down and kind of semi-prepare something this week to do on YouTube. So I'm going to pivot and I'm going to talk about something else, and that is a historian writing historical fiction. As I said in my very first video, that I actually started out as a writer. And a lot of folks assume, oh, you're a historian who decided to write historical fiction on the side. No, it kind of went the other way. I was a writer who apparently didn't know when to stop and ended up with a PhD in the topic. Um, so folks are interested in that. They ask me, first of all, how did you get into it? Well, that's where I started actually. And then they ask, and at a book signing some years back now, a colleague of mine asked me kind of an interesting question. He wanted to know what impact writing fiction had on me as a historian and how I do history. And I think there is this assumption there. Sometimes historical fiction is like the stepchild of history. It's not taken seriously. You can't be a serious historian and do historical fiction. And so maybe I took him a bit by surprise whenever I said, actually, I think writing historical fiction has made me a better historian. Okay. So I know you're going, why? It's fiction. Okay. Well, first of all, as you know, if you have been listening to my prior videos, there is a lot of room for discussion, disagreement. I spent a lot of time talking about the sources, and as you have probably gathered, I'm rather cautious in my evaluation of those sources and in saying this happened or that happened, or Alexander said this. I put it in a lot of cases, we have no idea what Alexander said. This is what some later source writer said Alexander said. Um, and so I tend to be very cautious as a historian. And part of why I am that way actually has to do with doing historical fiction writing. So when you are writing a novel, okay, then you are thinking about various levels here. So we have the basic level of what happened in it. And again, we could debate some about did this happen? How did this happen? Etc. And as a historical fiction author, unlike being a historian, as a historian, I can stand back and say, well, it might have been this, it could have been that, it could also possibly have been this. As a fiction author, you cannot do that. You have to make a choice. You have to have in the novels, they're about the young Alexander before he became the great. The first one is Becoming. It's really one novel that Riptide decided to cut in half for reasons of length. So there are two novels. You should read them back to back because it was written as one novel. The story arc is across both of them. At the end of it, it ends with the death of Philip. Okay, that is not really a spoiler because it is a historical event that occurred. And it goes from the arrival of Hephaestion, who's actually in some ways really the main protagonist in here, at the court until the death of Philip. In history, who killed Philip is just a little bit of a mystery. And in fact, whenever I get around to continuing it, and I do hope to continue the series if I can find a publisher that wants the rest of it, then we'll look at it that way. But as a fiction author, I have to make a choice who killed Philip, or I have to make a choice about what happens in this place or what happens in that place. I can't say, well, it might have been this, but it might have been this, and it might have been that. This is not choose your own adventure. So when doing that, as an author, you become very, very conscious of these various levels. So there's okay, Philip died. Somebody stabbed him in the back in a theater full of thousands of people. Hollywood, eat your heart out. That's a real thing. This is how it actually occurred. Um, but then we have the various levels of who killed him, what happened next. Actually, we don't really know, but we can game it out and figure it out. And there's these other levels. So it's all builds on here's what happened, here's probably what happened as well. So this is uh, speculation, that's probable speculation. Then you have educated speculation. Well, it could have been this, and then you get up into the stuff that you're creating. And of course, you have to create something that's believable, but it's pure fiction at that level. So, for instance, with the character of Hephaestion, we really only know his name and his father's name. Well, I have to give the poor guy a family in the novel. And so I spin that out from my own research into him, give his mother a name, give him his sister, brothers, etc. So this is the sort of thing that historical fiction authors do. But you have to be really honest in your own head about what is speculative, what's pure fiction. And honestly, I think that makes you a better historian. I am perhaps less inclined to necessarily get behind my idea that this has to be the case, because maybe it doesn't, maybe it's not how it occurred at all, and so there are these other possibilities, and I get to play with what I think maybe happened in fiction. So is that an outlet? Maybe I don't know, but it does make you really think about the levels of what we know, the levels of probability for our speculation in terms of doing the history behind the novels. Also, when you are working on a novel isn't history. It does have a storyline. So, like I said, you need to read both of the books together because the story arc it goes across both of the novels. There's some shaping involved. There are events I tell you and events I don't tell you, and so you have to think about that and pull out of history what you think is critical. This is a coming of age novel, so it follows Alexander from really kind of just before his 13th birthday until he's basically just turned 20 at the end. So it goes through him growing up and the terrible teens period in there for it. And so I have to think about what to include. You don't go into a historical novel and say, well, I have to show this, and I have to show this, and I have to show. You're going to have a mess. You're not going to have a story. Okay. Some folks, whenever they've read it, said, well, why didn't you talk about stuff, Philip's campaign over here and that? Because Alexander's not involved in that. Okay. So you have to focus on things and pick and choose what you're doing. So in the first book, it is very focused on Alexander's time with Aristotle at Mysia, on his personal growth, his coming to trust Hephaestion, his relationship with his other friends. There's not as much politics in there for the very simple reason I can't take the average reader who is not a Macedonian specialist and toss them in to fourth century politics head first. So you build it up gradually. I introduce you to Macedonia, and the idea of how politics works there. It opens with the question of Alexander getting a tutor, Aristotle's coming, because he realizes, okay, Daddy may have now fixed on me as an heir. He was not an only child. He had a brother, Arrhidaeus. Probably Arrhidaeus was slightly older than him, but there was something off, we know, mentally with him. We don't know what was wrong. But he also had a cousin, an older cousin, Amyntas, who was the son of Philip's older brother, Perdiccas, who was also a contingent for the throne. And so Alexander realized, oh hey, I'm getting picked now. Daddy's looking at me. He's getting me this special tutor. So we're moving forward in this direction. So the question is, will I survive to become king? That's part of it. How does he go from being one prince to being the prince to on the doorstep of becoming king himself? He doesn't know what's going to happen next. Okay. He doesn't know he'll become Alexander the Great. So the story's a lot about that. And it's only in book two that you get much in the way of politics on the larger scale. So these are the sorts of decisions that authors have to make and why they make the decisions they do. Another decision I made in here was to use all Greek names. Most people have not said anything about it. If anything, they like it. But there have been a few people who said, why are you calling him Alexandros instead of Alexander or Philippos instead of Philip? This confuses me. I don't like it. My goal is very intentional. I want the reader to think about them as characters, not as Alexander the Great, because again, he doesn't know he's going to become that in this story. And especially with Alexander's mother, Olympias. In the novel, she's Myrtile. That she had four names, okay? She was born Polyxena. She got the name Myrtile at some point. She is renamed Olympias after the birth of Alexander by Philip. And then much later, she's Stratonice, after Alexander's dead. So names are flexible. You might think of Olympias as maybe being a throne name of sorts. But I'm calling her Myrtile on purpose because I want to unhook her from all the negative baggage in the histories about Olympias and to see her anew. It's not that I'm making her a nice mom who bakes cookies. She is a powerful woman, but she's not this witchy bitch with snakes. In fact, nary a snake hardly to be found in these. And that's intentional. So there are a lot of these choices that the author makes about the history when diving into it, and what you show and what you don't show in the fictional books. But that means thinking about it. That means knowing the history. And for the historian who's writing it, it also makes you think more carefully about the sources themselves and orients you toward those sources in a different way. So yes, I think writing historical fiction, far from being the history light or the easy way out or anything, actually it's the opposite. And you have to become kind of a jack of all trades. I spent 2 days in the Penn State Library looking at material on ancient glassmaking for a single line in the first novel. That line later got cut. Okay, but I learned about glassmaking, and now whenever I lecture, I can talk about glassmaking with a little bit of familiarity. I learned all about Greek curses because instead of using words like damn it, which is very Christianized, I decided let's just use oimoi. Okay, that's what they're using. And so it made me rethink some of these things outside of my normal wheelhouse. So again, it stretches you as a historian. You have to go look into other things that you might not normally do. So I feel much better about social history and other aspects after having written the book and after having to think about things. Even trade. Did they have this item in an early version of it? I mentioned them using clove water, kind of like a mouthwash. And then realizing after I checked, they don't have cloves yet. Okay, they can't use that because they don't have it. So you're looking up all of this stuff, and it really, stretches you, as I said, as a historian. So yes, the two novels, these are the English versions of them, the covers. There are some older covers, but these are the new ones. And while sometimes it may not matter which version you get, I would strongly recommend that you get the new one because I had a chance to go through and okay, I'm a writer, I'm also a historian. I like to go in and fix things. There were some typos in the original. I have fixed them going back through. Also, in the earlier version, the beautiful map, which, by the way, was made by my niece. It is gorgeous. I don't know how well you can see it. I have it on my website. She drew that to her crazy aunt specs. I said, Selena, do this, Selena, do that. Okay, so she produced this beautiful map. Originally, it was only in book one, but now it is also in book two, where it actually matters more because this is where they're traveling more, and you might want to have that map. There's also at the end of book one some material out of book two. So this is available in ebook. It's also available as print on demand. So if you want to support me, this is one way to do it. Go buy the book. It also, as I mentioned in the first video, I have the beautiful, beautiful Italian editions. Okay, so it has been translated into Italian, and they're very shiny. Okay. So if you would rather read it in Italian, there you go. You can get it there as well. In addition to getting either the print or the ebook, some folks may not realize, but I have a website as well. When we were first putting the book out, there was a lot of what's called back matter. So I had the option. They asked me to please do put all of it on the website instead. So rather than having the books, I'm trying to get that thing to go away, rather than having the books with a lot of material in the back, it's here on the website instead. And you can go down here and look at things. This has how to get copies of the book. Okay. This is the author's note that is in the back of book two. It is the one thing I definitely insisted on having. At the beginning, especially book one, you have a little handy, helpful, this is who this is. Most of the changes in names, you won't even know because it's all about spelling. So Hephaestion is spelled with an AI instead of an AE. But there are a few. So Alexandros is Alexander, Philippos is Philip. I'm trying to get this over. So there's a list of the most common names that you might not immediately know. But I'm not going to insult my readers. My readers can figure out that Ptolemaeus is Ptolemy. Okay. Again, they're not the changes are not that radical. But the author's note, I insisted to go in the printed book because I am a historian and I do feel that it is important to tell the reader what I changed or what choices I made. And so that's what's in the author's note. Tells you a little bit about that. At the very beginning is some material I've written on if you were interested in writing historical fiction, kind of how to go about it. In addition to this, I've been to Macedonia and I've had a chance to go around and visit places. And so I was able to make some videos, which are available on the site for you to go take a look at some of the things that are described in the book. Okay. And also my niece's lovely map is here as well on it. Okay. So the map is here. Then there's a little bit about me if you want to know more, including various other interviews I have done is all listed there. And then last might be of the most interest for folks who have read the novels already and want more. This tells you, first of all, some of the cut scenes. And then because there was a gap when we published the two novels, one was published in June or July, and then the other one came out in October. And in that space, I added a couple of extra scenes as well. So not everything you write ends up in the final. So these are a couple of things that got cut out of the various novels. And so these are some of that. And then some in between scenes that I wrote as folks were waiting for the second book to come out. So these are over on the website. If you like the novels and you like the story and you want to read more, or if you haven't bought the novels yet and you want to say, what does she really write like? You can go over there and read that and get a test. Also, I have pronounced all of the names for you so you can hear me saying these names and what they actually sound like. I know for a lot of readers, people don't care. So the characters become whatever their first name is. So Eryngios, one of the boys, Alexander goes to school with, he just becomes the E guy. Leonidas becomes the L guy. Perdiccas becomes the P guy, and that's fine. Whenever I'm reading novels with languages I don't know, that's kind of what I do too. So that's perfectly fine. But if you want to actually hear how the names sound, you can do that. I've got statues if you want to see what some of the characters look like, where we actually have images. Just for fun, I created a playlist. I'm convinced that Alexander would be a heavy metal fan, so there's a lot of heavy metal here if you want to go over and have a playlist. I've done that. Perhaps so of most use, and what was originally part of the back matter that we moved over here is the list of characters, who's at Misa, so you can kind of keep track. Some of Philip's officers, significant other people, the names of some of the former Macedonian kings, a limited glossary for some of the Greek terms that I utilize instead of the English. That's all there. The Macedonian months, if you're curious what they are in equivalent to ours. So you've got Macedonian, Athenian, our modern, and then a little bit about obscenity. Uh, Occasionally, I get folks asking me, you have the boys using the finger. Yeah, the ancient Greeks did. And it meant kind of the same thing it does now. So there's some surprising overlap, but there's also some surprising lack of overlap. So when they would curse, curses were always literal. So you wouldn't drop a cup for the most part and shout, shit. Okay. Something can be like shit, but it's not a curse that way. You would yell oi moi if you broke something. Okay. So there's a little bit on the website if you're curious, and maybe that's the historian in me that I want to share some of the additional information with readers. But that's my Wednesday talk this time. Again, took that little turn, decided to write a little bit, or talk a little bit about being a historian who also writes historical fiction, and the values and virtues of writing historical fiction, even for trained historians. How does it make me a better historian? Because I think it does.